The Unexplained Rundown is pleased to partner with tpublic.com and bring you some fun and fantastical apparel and accessories that are truly out of this world. If you're keen to support the show and see it grow, be sure to check out some of the cool designs in the merch store and grab yourself a bargain. Use the link in the description below.
Concern you about the unknown and the unidentified flying object?
Oh, yes, we discussed it at every conference that we had with the military, and they never were able to make me a concrete report on.
Do you have anything on the subject, sir?
No, I haven't had anything on the subject, and there's always things like that going on. The flying saucers, and we've had other things, you know.
For years, the world has seen reality distorted, facts manipulated, and truth hidden. But there's even more to the story than anyone has ever suspected. Because no one has been able to see the whole picture. Until now.
We are back, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Unexplained Rundown. I'm your host, Grant Levac, and if you found this channel intentionally, then like me, you're intrigued by the unexplained mysteries of this mortal coil of ours, and you crave to know what's real and what's not. We've got some regulars in the house, as always. Always good to see you, my friend Jimmy. Thanks for tuning in. Shorter to Cook is here as well. Anthony, Encounters Down Under, great to see you, my friend. Thanks for chiming in. Bex is here as well. Good to see you as always, my friend. I don't think George is here as of yet, but if he stays true to historical averages, then he will probably be here. We don't know, but it is always good to see some regulars in the chat. I always love your comments and your sidebar conversations, engagement as we go through. So feel free to opine, type in any questions you've got, have conversations in the chat. It's always good to see what you guys have got to talk about. So on that note, what are we talking about this evening? We are going to do a bit of a, I wouldn't say a comprehensive deep dive, but a bit of a comprehensive overview, let's say that, on the current great divide that exists between good old Australia and the United States on the UAP issue. And that has only further been amplified by President Trump's recent directive to have US government UFO, UAP extraterrestrial files released. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So you can really see this, Australia and the United States, closest of allies, yet their positions on UAP could unfortunately not be further apart. Now, you might be wondering, with the graphic that's on screen there, why is there an aircraft carrier and two fighter jets in the sky? Well, for many folks that are new to this topic, for them, the UAP UFO conversation, it really started in 2004, November of 2004. We know the now famous Nimitz incident. Now, for those of us that are a little bit more well versed on this topic, we know that the UAPU issue dates back to Roswell. Some will suggest pre-Roswell, with the Magenta crash in 1933, I believe it was. And Australia and the United States both have a very long history of investigating UFOs. For the US, it was from 47, maybe earlier, through to date. For Australia, it was the years after Roswell, up until 1996. And for the last 30 years, Australia has sat on its fat ass and has not done anything publicly on this topic. And we're going to highlight that in this evening's episode. A few others that are here. I want to say hello to Jojo Diamonds. Great to see you. Thanks for tuning in. Aussie Ange. Not sure if I've seen you in the chat before, but welcome. Thanks for joining. Aaron, always good to see you, my friend, as well. And thank you, Shorter to Cook. The splendor that is AI can sometimes generate some nice graphics for you. So I am a fan of good old Google Gemini. Thanks to Jimmy for putting me onto it. So let's dive on in, folks. Before we do, obviously, if you are new to the channel, please consider subscribing. A lot of folks that watch the show aren't subscribers, so smash that subscribe button. If you want to share this episode with your family, friends, network, feel free. Give it a like. And if you want to go above and beyond the like, share, subscribe for a couple of gold coins a month, you can support the channel and see it grow. Check out the membership options, Patreon and YouTube in the show notes below. So, and thank you, obviously, to all my current Patreon and YouTube members. As always, greatly appreciate your patronage and your ongoing support. So let's dive on in. So for those of you, and it's probably not going to be many, that are new to the UAP, UFO conversation, and maybe you don't have a great frame of reference for the Nimitz incident, or commonly referred to as the Tic Tac UFO incident of 2004, let me play for you a video clip of then Commander David Fravor providing his opening statement at the House Oversight Committee congressional hearing on UAP in 2023, which I feel is a really good summary of the Tic Tac, the Nimitz incident, and that will kind of help set the stage for us as we jump into tonight's presentation. So again, this is Commander David Fravor giving his opening statement at the UAP congressional hearing in July of 2023.
My name is David Fravor. I'm a retired commander in the United States Navy. In 2004, I was a commanding officer of Strike Fighter Squadron 41, the world-famous Black Aces. We were attached to Carrier Wing 11, stationed on board the USS Nimitz, and had begun a 2-month workup cycle off the coast of California. On this day, we were scheduled for a 2v2 air-to-air training with the USS Princeton as our control. When we launched off Nimitz, my wingman was joining up. We were told that the training was going to be suspended and we were going to proceed with real-world tasking. As we proceeded to the west, the air controller was counting down the range to an object that we were going to, and we were unaware of what we were going to see when we arrived. The controller told us that these objects had been observed for over 2 weeks, coming down from over 80,000 feet, rapidly descending to 20,000 feet, hanging out for hours, and then going straight back up. For those who don't realize, above 80,000 feet is space. We arrived at the location at approximately 20,000 feet, and the controller called merge plot, which means that our radar blip was now in the same resolution cell as the contact. As we looked around, we noticed that we saw some whitewater off our right side. It's important to note that the weather on this day was as close to perfect as you could ask for off the coast of San Diego. Clear skies, light winds, calm seas, no whitecaps from waves. So the whitewater stood out in a large blue ocean. All 4 of us, because we were in F-18Fs, so we had pilots and Wizzo in the back seat, looked down a small, saw a white tic-tac object with a longitudinal axis pointing north-south and moving very abruptly over the water like a ping-pong ball. There were no rotors, no rotor wash, or any sign of visible control surfaces like wings. As we started clockwise towards the object, my Wizzo and I decided to go down and take a closer look with the other aircraft staying in high cover to observe both us and the tic-tac. We proceeded around the circle about 90 degrees from the start of our descent, and the object suddenly shifted its longitudinal axis, aligned it with my aircraft, and began to climb. We continued down another 270 degrees, nose low, where the tic-tac, or we considered 270 degrees to where, and we went nose low to where the tic-tac would have been. Our altitude at this point was about 15,000 feet, and the tic-tac was about 12,000. As we pulled nose onto the object, within about a half mile of it, it rapidly accelerated in front of us and disappeared. Our wingman, roughly 8,000 feet above us, lost contact also. We immediately turned back to see where the whitewater was at, and it was gone also. So as we started to turn back towards the east, the controller came up and said, "Sir, you're not going to believe this, but that thing is at your cap point, roughly 60 miles away in less than a minute." You can calculate the speed. We returned to Nimitz. We were taking off our gear. We were talking to one of my crews that was getting ready to launch. We mentioned it to them, and they went out and luckily got the video that you see, that 90-second video. What you don't see is the radar tape that was never released, and we don't know where it's at, of the active jamming that the object put on an APG-73 radar, and I can get into modes later if you're interested. What is shocking to us is that the incident was never investigated. None of my crew were ever questioned. Tapes were never taken, and after a couple days, it turned into a great story with friends. It wasn't until 2009 until Jay Stratton had contacted me to investigate. Unbeknownst to all, he was part of the ATIP program in the Pentagon led by Lou Elizondo. And there was an official report that came out that's now on the internet. Years later, I was contacted by the other pilot, Alex Dietrich, and asked if I'd been contacted, and I said no, but I'm willing to talk. I was contacted by Mr. Elizondo, and we talked for a short period of time, and he said we'd be in contact. A few weeks after that, I was made aware that Lou had left the Pentagon in protest and joined forces with Tom DeLonge, Chris Mellon, Steve Justice, and others to form Two Stars Academy, an organization that pressed the issue with leading industry experts and U.S. government officials. They worked with Leslie Kean, who is present today, Ralph Blumenthal, and Helene Cooper to publish the articles in the New York Times 2017 New York Times, and it removed the stigma on the topic of UFOs, which is why we're here today. Those articles open the door for the government and public that cannot be closed. It has led to an interest from our elected officials who are not focused on little green men, but figuring out where these craft are, where are they from, the technology they possess, how do they operate. It also led to the Whistleblower Protection Act and the NDAA. There are multiple witnesses coming forward to say that have firsthand knowledge, and Mr. Grush just covered that. What concerns me is that there's no oversight from our elected officials on anything associated with our government processing or working on craft. Believe it, not from this world. This issue is not a full public disclosure that could undermine national security, but it is about ensuring that our system of checks and balances works across all work done in the government using taxpayer funds. Relative to government programs, even unacknowledged WAVE programs have some level of oversight by the appropriate committee members in the House and Senate, and this work that is said to be occurring from whistleblower testimonies should not be exempt. In closing, I would like to say that the Tic Tac object we engaged in 2004 was far superior to anything that we had on time, have today, or are looking to develop in the next 10 years. If we in fact have programs that possess this technology, it needs to have oversight from those people that the citizens of this great country elected in office to represent what is best for the United States and best for the citizens. I thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
There you go. So an incredibly compelling opening statement from Commander David Fravor there. And I think it's a really good summary as to where we're at today since the Tic Tac incident of 2004 to the bombshell reporting from the New York Times. No matter how inaccurate some of it may have been, it kind of, that opening statement there summed up quite well where we're currently at, the current state of play. And so again, for a lot of folks that are new to the topic, they will have kind of thought, well, everything started in 2004, even though there is a long history for Australia and the United States on this topic. So using Commander David Fravor's opening statement there as context, let's use that as an opportunity to transition into what we're talking about this evening. So a couple of years ago, a media outlet called The War Zone, which does some great articles, Tyler Rogaway does some great articles. Let me show you an article that they put out in January of 2023 on the Tic Tac incident. So this is from the War Zone. This is an article by Joseph Trevethick, published the 13th of January 2023, and it talks about the recently released Navy range fowler reports are heavily redacted but still contain new details and insights. So around this time, the reporting mechanisms, the reporting forms that were used to document what Commander David Fravor and Alex Dietrichs and their respective WISOs observed, and maybe even the pilot Underwood that captured the Tic Tac footage, which you can see on the left here. The range fowler report was released and made publicly available. And so let me pull up on screen for you. Oh, my mouse keeps dying, so I'm going to have to go over to the old mouse in front of me here. So let's have a look at the actual range fowler reports. Now, I'm going to come back to what I've highlighted there because that's what's important for us this evening. So we can see on this report, a lot of the stuff is redacted, B1, in the interest of national security. But if you look basically from where it says ships, it's saying ships, Nimitz, USS Princeton, the VAW 117, so Hawkeye that's in the air, the VMFA 232, VFA 41, and the USS Louisville. So they're all part of the exercise. 30 nautical miles off the coast of Mexico, southwest of San Diego. That's where it occurred. It was a solid white smooth with no edges. It was uniformly colored with no nacelles, pylons, or wings. It was approximately 46 feet in length. Pilots reported the incident through intelligence personnel. There was a large amount of harassment and ridicule throughout the Nimitz. And then reporting continues. Reporting terminated at Third Fleet, there was no process to start the reporting, although the debriefs of aircrew and other personnel within the strike group validated the event. There was, and then redacted. So that was the extent of what was captured or was released publicly in the Range Fowler report. And obviously it was great to be able to hear from Commander Fravor directly in a congressional hearing under oath. So you might be wondering, well, what does this code at the top, secret / rel to USA, comma, 5 eyes. Now, for those of you that have watched the show a number of times, you'll know we've talked repeatedly about the 5 eyes, which the acronym is FVEY. So I'll read out to you. This is just a quick summary. And this is why it's important to, in the context of what we're talking about this evening. It says, in the context of US defense and intelligence documents released under the Freedom of Information Act, REL FVEY, REL 5I, is a standardized portion control marking that stands for releasable to 5 eyes. It indicates that the information within that document has been cleared for sharing with the United States' closest intelligence sharing partners. So the REL is short for releasable. This signifies that a formal disclosure decision has been made to allow foreign disclosure of specific classified information. And the FVEY, the authorized country code trigraph for the 5 Eyes Intelligence Alliance, which we know as United States, Canada, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand. When you see that REL FVEY in the banner or portion markings of a redacted or partially declassified US document, it tells you a few critical things about the document's history. International relevance. The subject matter involves data operations or analysis that the US deemed necessary or beneficial to share with its 4 closest allies. For example, shared tracking of anomalies, defense exercises, or joint strategic intelligence. Now, if it was the acronym NOFORN, which is no fawn, that's in contrast, where that is directly the opposite. That means not releasable to foreign nationals. And some of you that have seen documents that are released through FOIA before, you may have seen that marking. In this case, it means it's releasable to 5 eyes. Even if a document has been released to you via a US FOIA request with heavy redactions, seeing REL FVEY, REL 5 eyes, intact gives you a structural clue. It provides, or I should say it proves, that the underlying information was vetted and approved for distribution within the Alliance network before it was processed for public release. So the all-important question is, was this and other Navy Range Fowler reporting forms released to 5 Eyes member countries, including Australia? Was it disseminated to the, particularly with respect to intelligence, we can assume, was it shared with, say, the Defense Intelligence Organization, the DIO? Now, I've never seen any documentary evidence on Australia's side to support that, provide an answer to that question, but we certainly know that the US was, back in 2004, willing to share this data, this information with its closest allies, including Australia. So put a pen in that, put a pin in that, and keep that up your sleeve. Because if you think about everything that's happened since 2004 and even 2017 beyond on this topic, just to kind of give you a sense as to how seriously the US is now taking this issue of UAP, if we now come back to the trusty slide deck, which I'll just pull this up for us again. There we go. So, well, what's happened since 2004 in the US? Well, we know that James Lakatsky was the principal that headed up, he was the head honcho, the director of the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program, moniker or nicknamed ATIP. That was 2008 to 2011, 12, went for a couple of years and then was not renewed. And then you have Lou Elizondo come on the scene in 2017, courtesy of the New York Times reporting, and he had come out and said that there was a program called ATIP that he was the director of, that he charged, and that He resigned in protest in 2017 because no one in defense was really taking the issue of UAP seriously. And then we have Jay Stratton, who was the inaugural director of the UAP task force. Now, it's ambiguous who created the ATIP that we've heard Lou Elizondo run time and time again. Well, Jay Stratton says that he established that in 2015. But then if you read Lou's book and you look at some of the early podcasts that Lou has appeared on, he said he was the one that established ATIP and was the director. So we still don't have a complete lot of clarity around who was running what, who was involved, was it an official, unofficial program? But we certainly do know that Jay Stratton was the inaugural director of the UAP task force. And then he was succeeded by Brennan McKernan. So you have these three investigatory bodies, ORSAP, ATIP, and the UAPTF, that were investigating the UAP UFO phenomenon. Now, what's happened, obviously, following on from the UAPTF? Well, we have the ODNI released what I consider to be, a pretty significant document, the preliminary assessment on UAP that it released on 25th of June, 2021, that clearly indicated in an official document, government document, that the UAP issue is real. It represents a clear and present danger to safety of flight and a potential national security threat. Those were the two big takeaways, certainly for me, and that of the 144 cases that they examined, they could only resolve one of them. So 143 remained unresolved at the time. Now, what's happened since the ODNI's preliminary assessment? Well, we know that AARO was formally congressionally mandated and implemented in 2022. And its first inaugural director, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, held tenure 2022 to 2023, and then Tim Phillips was the acting director, and now we have Dr. Oops, that's not correct. It should be Dr. John Kosloski on the right there. I've put in the wrong name. I've doubled up, but you get the sense he was 2024 to present day. And what else has happened? Well, we've had 6 congressional hearings in 4 years. 6 hearings, May 2022, April 2023, Kirkpatrick in front of Gillibrand's subcommittee. We have the significant hearing in July 2023, David Grush, Ryan Graves, Commander David Fravor, and you saw his opening statement in that clip a second ago. Then we had a little over a year later, November 2024, Lou Elizondo. You had Rear Admiral Timothy Gallaudet, you had Schellenberger, and you had Mike Gold. And then that same month later on, we had the current director, John Kosloski, provide his congressional testimony before, again, Gillibrand's hearing, which only went for about half an hour. And then in 2020, sorry, it should be 2025. I've got the date wrong there. September 2025, we had the most recent hearing of George Knapp and others. So you've had 6 hearings in 4 years, and that just shows you, that kind of gives you a sense as to how serious the US is taking this issue. If it was a big nothing burger and there's nothing to it, you wouldn't have had 6 hearings. You wouldn't have had all of these investigatory bodies that have been established since 2008 through to date. So in stark contrast, look at that with Australia's position. And on screen is the current Minister for Defence, also the Deputy Prime Minister, Richard Marles. He's held the position of Minister of Defence from 2022. So let's have a look at, before we dive into information specifically pertaining to Australia, let me actually show you, this was only released recently, and this is just to kind of give you an additional sense as to how serious the US is taking the issue of UAP. This was a recent article that was released in an online publication called CTX, a special issue on UAP, science and analysis. And if I I'll read the the front letter from the guest editor, and then we'll jump into what we really want to hone in on this particular special article. It says unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAP, in the modern term used for what was traditionally known as unidentified flying objects, UFOs. The term UAP first appeared in the late 1960s and in recent decades has gradually replaced UFO in US official and scientific context. The shift reflects an effort to move away from the culturally loaded, stigmatized, and often limiting connotations of UFO toward a more inclusive and precise definition. Unlike the earlier term, UAP encompasses reported anomalous detections across multiple domains, rather than being confined to aerial observations alone. For decades, both trained observers and members of the public have reported objects exhibiting unusual and often unexplained characteristics. These observations have captured widespread attention. For some, national security concerns, safety, and scientific inquiry drive interest. For others, fascination centers on the possibility of unknown technologies or even extraterrestrial origins, reflecting a more speculative and curious approach to what may exist beyond our current understanding. Regardless of motivation, the undeniable reality is that UAP represents a phenomenon of growing significance and interest, making it essential to approach the topic with rigor, without stigma, and guided by evidence-based inquiry. Getting institutional legitimacy has repositioned UAP from a marginal topic to a subject of serious inquiry. Organizations such as the US Department of Defense, the US Department of Homeland Security, NASA, and leading scientific institutions, both within the United States and equivalent organizations internationally, have dedicated significant resources and personnel in studying these phenomena and addressing critical knowledge and analysis gaps. Sustained public interest and congressional hearings have reinforced transparency and accountability, helping normalize the study of UAP as a credible area for scientific and policy inquiry, and encouraging more rigorous open reporting and investigation. Recognizing the importance of this complex subject area, the U.S. Naval Postgraduate School, NPS, and this is the behind this publication, in close partnership with the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, presents this inaugural special issue, which centers on integrating scientific technologies into the study of UAP. Its goal is to highlight the importance of UAP through a focused, systematic, evidence-based approach, encourage stigma-free reporting and dialogue, examine current gaps and challenges, and promote collaborative strategies for the United States, and this is the important bit, its allies and partner nations to advance rigorous study and best practices in addressing these phenomena. The issues open with a forward. I won't maybe go into what's included in the piece, but I do want to take you to the interview that was conducted with the current AARO director, Dr. John Kosloski. So if we come to that specifically, this again just highlights, how seriously the US is taking this issue and how far the US has come since 2004. Let me just zoom on it a bit so it's a bit easier on my eyes here. There we go. All right. So on December 4th, 2025, Lawrence Walter facilitated an interview with Dr. John T. Kosloski. The interview questions were tailored to address key issues surrounding UAP for this special journal issue, offering valuable insights into AARO's mission, priorities, and challenges. The discussion provided an important opportunity to hear directly from AARO leadership and explore ways to strengthen interagency collaboration and advance efforts related to UAP problem sets. So Walter asked the question, I think I said Walter, it's Walter. To begin, could you explain the primary mission of AARO and how it fits within the broader national security defense framework? Kosloski's response: certainly, AARO's mission is to synchronize efforts across the Department of Defense and other federal agencies to better detect, identify, and attribute objects of interest with a focus on national security sites and critical infrastructure. Unknown objects in any domain, whether in the air, sea, or space, pose potential threats to national security and warrant the attention of the US government. AARO is the first whole-of-government effort to advance the idea of multi-domain awareness for anomaly resolution as a core security objective. As we've all seen from conflicts around the globe, warfare is changing rapidly. We help the department stay ahead of developments to ensure our warfighters have the knowledge and tools to mitigate risk and maintain our technological edge in any environment or operational context. Next question was, that's remarkable. What really stands out to me in AARO's mission is the emphasis on whole of government efforts and the pursuit of multi-domain awareness. Those approaches highlight that your work spans all domains, such as land, sea, air, and space, while applying scientific methods to understand potential national security issues. I also appreciate how central collaboration is to your mission, as well as your commitment to reporting findings to Congress and the public. Considering your multi-domain work, I'm wondering, what are the biggest challenges your office faces when investigating UAP? Kosloski: far and away, AARO's biggest challenge is a lack of high-quality data. U.S. military sensors, both the technology and the human operators, are second to none at doing their specific mission, but they aren't general-purpose scientific instruments. So when one of these highly specialized sensors detects something potentially anomalous, the data captured is often not well-suited for rigorous scientific investigations. This mismatch can lead to incorrect initial assessments of an object's size, speed, or appearance. AARO sees this play out in its findings. The overwhelming majority of UAP reports resolved turn out to be misattributions of ordinary, prosaic, in other words, or everyday objects. Importantly, we do not have a conclusion in mind before we start an investigation. AARO will follow the data wherever it leads, but we need good data to follow. Next question: how does AARO handle public interest and skepticism stigma around UAP reports? Kosloski: this is a crucial point. The US government takes UAP seriously, and there should be no stigma associated with making a UAP report. Detailed reports of UAP observations are essential to AARO's work, and withholding a report could potentially endanger US national security. When a UAP is reported, our team seeks detailed information about its physical characteristics, performance, and behavior. We are also interested in information about the observer and the environment to support a full analysis and, when possible, resolution. AARO focuses its efforts on the national security concerns associated with domain awareness gaps. The stigmatization of UAP reporting actively hinders our mission. We appreciate public interest in UAP and examine each case with an open mind. We always start from a position of curiosity, and from there, we simply follow the data. Next question: are there specific innovations or tools that you believe will significantly enhance AARO's capabilities? Above all, we need more high-quality sensor data, and we need better trained observers. We need the ability to assess the many existing sensor systems operated by the US government while building new bespoke sensors as needed. As for better trained observers, we find that a big part of our work focuses on education and awareness. AARO publishes educational material to help familiarize US government personnel and the public with common sources of UAP misattributions, things like parallax, satellite flaring, or even in-camera artifacts. Our objective is to improve the quality of the incoming report so we can focus our resources on the UAP events that may demonstrate truly anomalous characteristics. AARO is also looking into bringing new analytic capabilities online using artificial intelligence-enabled algorithms to filter vast data sets for potential anomalies. Next question: what is your approach to interagency information sharing and fostering cooperation internationally? And this is really what we want to focus on. Kosloski's response: interagency cooperation is essential to our work. AARO works closely with partners across the federal government who bring their own unique expertise to bear in the effort to better understand and respond to UAP sightings. We have also participated in several international engagements with US security partners to share insights and best practices for UAP analysis. Now, I'm only aware of the one international engagement across the Five Eyes, and that was the inaugural Five Eyes UAP caucus, or the Five Eyes inaugural UAP caucus working group meeting that took place on the 24th of May of 2023. Don't know if there have been any other Five Eyes engagements in person since then, but something we're trying to find out. Meanwhile, we work with groups outside of government, especially in the scientific and academic communities, which we rely on to provide feedback on our assessments, conduct scientific research, and ensure our approach remains grounded in a peer-reviewed process. We try to share as much information as possible at the unclassified level, recognizing that significant expertise resides outside of government. Question, I could second that. Recognizing how essential interagency cooperation is to your work, our center is eager to join forces with NPS faculty and students, as well as international partners, and help drive collaboration across multiple lines of effort, academic research, education, experimentation, peer-reviewed publications, CRADA, which some of you will know about the arts parts that went through a CRADA agreement and turned out to be prosaic materials in nature, and more. Beyond partnerships with academia, interagency teams, and non-government organizations, how can the services, particularly the US Navy, better support your mission? Kosloski, the best way the services can support AARO is by continuing to promptly report UAP incidents and retain any technical data in accordance with the February 2025 Joint Staff General Administration Guidance on UAP Reporting and Material Disposition. That guidance lays out the best way to preserve and convey all the important information AARO needs to begin an investigation. There should be no stigma associated with reporting UAP. Reporting is in the national security interest. So full credit to AARO. They were, they were basically largely responsible for having mandatory reporting implemented, and that's why they got such a significant increase in their caseload. But credit to AARO for helping facilitate. Now, if you see something, you've got to say something. Question, what are the priority research focus areas that may best lead to increased capability and capacity to detect, identify, and attribute UAP? Kozlovsky's response, this is an area where our scientific and academic partners are key. AARO's top priority is facilitating the integration of the nation's diverse multi-domain sensing capabilities into a single unified architecture. We need the ability to access all the existing civilian and military systems we have, making sure all of our systems can talk to each other. We also need to develop novel detection, filtering, and filtering algorithms. We are dealing with vast data sets, so we need to find better ways to discriminate potential anomalies from all that noise, particularly when we're dealing with multi-sensor fusion and differing data types. This is important because sensors of different kinds may have observed the same incident from a different perspective, and integrating those perspectives could help AARO in its analysis. Question, what are your long-term goals for the office and how do you measure success? Kozlovsky's response, our long-term goal is to ensure that the Department of Defense, the intelligence community, and all the relevant civilian agencies are equipped to efficiently detect, track, analyze, and manage anomalous phenomena. We want them to be using standardized tools and tradecraft so everyone has a shared awareness using shared language. Measuring success can be challenging. That isn't a project with a finish line, it's an ongoing mission. However, AARO has already shown success in applying industry standard intelligence and scientific techniques to reduce the amount of time between receiving a report and rendering a finalized assessment. That improvement in efficiency shows that our value to national security only continues to grow as we hone our tradecraft. Each time we enable a partner to make sense of an observation or improve their domain awareness, that keeps them better informed and safer. We consider that a success. Question, of course, I have to ask you this next question. In all of AARO's investigations to date, have you found any evidence, data, or credible information that would suggest any UAP are extraterrestrial in origin? Response, that's the most common question I get, and I'm glad to answer it directly. To date, AARO has found no verifiable evidence suggesting any UAP incident we have investigated is extraterrestrial in origin or represents extraterrestrial technology. AARO will not assert a conclusion without evidence to support it, and we will not speculate about a phenomenon's nature or origin based on inconclusive data. As the saying goes, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. From what I've seen as a director, the data we've analyzed to date simply does not point to that conclusion. We do have many unresolved UAP cases, and we will continue to follow the data wherever it leads. Question, you've stated most resolved cases are prosaic objects. Of the unsolved cases, what is your working assessment? Are we primarily talking about sensor anomalies, or is there a genuine concern that these represent advanced and unknown technological capabilities from adversaries? Kosloski's response, this is precisely the question AARO was established to answer. Many of our cases result from sensor anomalies and other mundane explanations, but there is also the potential for strategic surprise from an adversary, perhaps using a new technology we're not familiar with or an old technology used in a new way. We simply cannot have unknowns operating in our airspace or any domain for that matter. Question, given the sensitivity of your work, I understand that certain data must be handled within specific classification boundaries. How do you balance public interest in UAP with the need to protect classified information? Can you explain what prevents AARO from releasing clearer data or video, and how are you working to declassify information so the public and scientific community can analyze it? Kosloski's response, AARO is constantly balancing its commitment to transparency with the need to protect national security information. We understand that public interest in UAP is high. We launched our public website, aro.mil, to share UAP imagery, trends, reports, and educational material at the unclassified level. However, much of AARO's data comes from highly sensitive military and intelligence systems. Importantly, AARO doesn't directly own those systems, so we work closely with the reporting service to declassify as much as we can while protecting our national security. Releasing unredacted video or military platform data could inadvertently reveal sensitive information. That's a compromise we simply cannot make. It would be handing a playbook to our adversaries. So our job is to be as transparent as possible by sharing our conclusions and declassifying imagery only when we are certain it won't damage national security. And we're coming to the end here. When we release data or video, we do so at the media's operational resolution without adulteration, with the only modifications being precise redactions to protect military or intelligence capabilities and vulnerabilities. Many of the systems from which AARO obtains data are not designed to produce high-resolution imagery. The videos that we post on our website are, unfortunately, as good as these reports get. It's part of the reason we continually emphasize the need for more and higher quality data associated with reports. Question, the government has a history of seeking to address this topic, often with inconclusive or dismissive results. What makes AARO fundamentally different from past efforts, and why should the public trust this time will be different, more transparent, definitive? Kosloski's response, AARO is the first whole-of-government effort established in law by Congress with the authority to synchronize this work across the Department of Defense, the intelligence community, and other federal agencies. We are integrated part of the national security framework and report directly to the Deputy Secretary of Defense and the Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence. We're the first UAP effort to have the full suite of investigative resources required to execute this authority and unfettered access to programs across the federal government, ensuring that we can be confident in our conclusions. Our methodology also sets us apart. We have built upon our predecessors' work and continue to develop a rigorous data-driven framework with credentialed scientists, investigators, and intelligence analysts. We're systematically applying serious, proven scientific and intelligence tradecraft to a large volume of data to make robustly informed assessments. It is this combination of broad authority, unprecedented access, robust resourcing, and a rigorous analytical process that makes AARO's efforts different from anything that has come before. Waltz's question, recognizing the importance of minimizing technical and intelligence surprises, I'm curious about the surprises at a more personal level. After reviewing all these data, reports from pilots, sensor readings, and videos, what, if anything, has personally surprised you the most about the UAP phenomenon? Kosloski, I've found it surprising that in this day of ubiquitous sensor coverage, it is still so difficult to get high quality, actionable data suitable for resolving or even just advancing our understanding of some of the more intriguing cases. That said, I have also found that many, I've also found that many of these initially baffling reports are fully explainable once you apply a rigorous scientific process. It is easy to look at a strange video and jump to conclusion, but time and time again, when our team of analysts and scientists dig in, we find the answer. It has been a powerful reminder of how important it is to stick to the data and not let assumptions get ahead of the evidence, regardless of how compelling a good mystery can be. In spite of all the noise, I always try to stay focused on the cases that may demonstrate true anomalies. Last couple of questions. Absolutely. The public fascination of UAPs makes it even more important to remain grounded in the data. It's a reminder that no matter how compelling or mysterious a phenomena may seem, rigorous scientific methods and evidence-based reasoning must peak our conclusions. And final thoughts. Kosloski's response to that, at its core, AARO's work is about resolving ambiguity in the name of national security. AARO is committed to a rigorous data-driven approach as it tackles this complex challenge. We follow the evidence wherever it leads without speculation or bias. We are here to ensure that operators, service members, and decision makers have the clearest possible understanding of their strategic and operational environments. And Walter's closing comments, I sincerely appreciate your time and the valuable insights you provided. Your mission is incredibly important, and I wish you and your office much success. Thank you. So very, very, irrespective of what you think of AARO, maybe it's former director Sean Kirkpatrick. I think John Kosloski was the man for the job all along. I think Sean Kirkpatrick was not the right guy for the job. But I'm reserving judgment on Kosloski until he puts his name to a report that sees the light of day, has been released publicly, because a lot of people still are not too sure as to if AARO is, is operating in the best interest of the public. I think, based on what I've read to you there, you can just see at that level how serious the Department of Defense is taking the issue of UAP to try and get to the bottom of the issue of UAP. All of the mandatory reporting, the analysis, the investigation, the intelligence sharing. Now, that's a very, very stark contrast to obviously what we're hearing from whistleblowers and witnesses saying that, well, AARO is gatekeeping information related to crash retrieval and reverse engineering programs. There, you've got these competing narratives at the moment. You've got AARO, which is unequivocally saying we have not found any verifiable evidence to date to suggest that UAP are extraterrestrial in origin. Flip that coin over, and you have the likes of whistleblowers and witnesses saying that there is a clandestine crash retrieval and reverse engineering program that's been operating in the dark, in the black, for how many decades, and a lot of that information is buried in these compartmentalized SAPs and WUSAPs and has never seen the light of day. So these competing narratives are very, very it's very, very hard to separate the wheat from the chaff. But in terms of what we're talking about this evening, the great divide between Australia and the United States, that all of that I just walked you through gives you a sense as to how serious the US Department of Defense and Congress is taking the issue of UAP, at least trying to better understand the nature and extent of UAP and mitigate potential national security threats, strategic surprise, as well as safety of flight. Now, contrast that, and I'll come to some of your comments that you've got. Contrast that with what the current Minister for Defence, Richard Marles, and the Australian Department of Defence under his leadership is doing. So what is Australia's current position on UAP? And the document that I'll show you is one that I was able to secure for release through, I mean, you all know what the answer to this is anyway, but to show you that one of the most recent documents that I got for release through the Freedom of Information Act, which one are we up to? Is this one. This is the most recent version of this document. The Chief of Air Force's brief, basically, or Senate estimates brief on UAP UFOs, last updated 19th of September 2024. Hasn't been updated since then because, unfortunately, Senator Wish Wilson has, or if not, will be retiring this year. So he has not asked questions of folks in positions of leadership and authority and defense about UAP since 2023. So they no longer, or haven't made any updates to this document because they're not getting pressed on it. But this document shows you the key messages from the Australian Department of Defence is Defence does not have, contrast this to what we've just gone through with respect to the US. Australian Defence does not have a specific policy governing the reporting or recording of unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAP, by either members of the public or defence members. It relies on existing reporting mechanisms, which are weak to say the least. Air Force ceased handling reports of the then termed unidentified flying objects in 1996 after determining there was no scientific or other compelling reason to continue. Existing defence procedures and mechanisms already enable the reporting of all aerial unidentified anomalous phenomena. Well, why are you saying aerial? I mean, it should be all domains. So you've got Navy, you've got Royal Australian Air Force, you've got Defence Space Command. But I mean, they're saying our Air Force ceased handling all these reports in 1996 after determining there was no scientific or other compelling reason. Well, have you even have you reviewed that long-held position? Because we live in a very different age 30 years later, where I've just shown you everything that's happened in the US within the last, since 2008, basically with the formation of ORSAP. You can see how far the US has come in taking this topic seriously from a national security standpoint and safety of flight risk, and contrast that with good old Australia sitting on our fat ass not doing anything, which is very, very frustrating for folks like myself and others that just want our country. We're patriots. We want our country to be in lockstep with the United States and get to the bottom of this UAP quagmire, this question, whatever UAP is. I just want Australia to acknowledge that UAP is real, to investigate it, to get off your ass and actually allow members of the Defence Force at the front lines to report it without fear of reprisals or stigma, and for there to be an effort to actually dig into these reports that would get submitted if there was a reporting protocol in place, so you can better understand the potential national security threats and safety of flight risks that UAP pose, and maybe find answers as to what UAP are, whether it's foreign adversarial or if it's something completely exotic and NHI in nature, as per the whistleblowers and witnesses have claimed time and time again over the last couple of years. So where does that kind of leave us? Well, if we look at some of the efforts that, I mean, this is just, I'm only one person, but I've kind of tried my very best to try and apply some pressure to the Australian Department of Defence and to get them to at least commit to a formal review of their long-held, their 30-year position on UAP. Move along, folks. Nothing to see here. There's no scientific or compelling reason to divert resources to it. Yet our US ally and Five Eyes partner is contributing significant resources, time, energy, and money to this problem. So this petition basically called for a formal review of unidentified anomalous phenomena, and for the Australian Department of Defence to consider the establishment of an investigatory body to assess the potential national security threats and safety of flight risk that UAP pose. Now, that petition secured 759 signatures. It closed on the 21st of June of 2023, and this was the response that came back from the Minister of Defence, Richard Marles, following that petition. And again, a lot of you have seen this, so apologies if it's a bit boring, but this is the response that that petition solicited. Dear Chair, the Chair of the Petitions Committee, thank you for your correspondence of 1 August 2023. So once the petition was certified with all of those signatures, it was referred to the Minister of Defence's office for a formal review and response, and this was that response. Thank you for your correspondence of 1 August 2023, presenting Petition EN5115, Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena UAP. I have considered the matters. I'm not too sure you have, but I have considered the matters raised in the petition. I note the petition requests the House conduct a formal review of UAP to consider the establishment of an investigatory body to assess the potential national security threats and safety of flight risks that UAP pose. As acknowledged in the petition, Defence ceased handling reports of UAP in 1996. And this is repeated line time and time again from defense, as there was no scientific or compelling reason to continue to divert resources to the recording and investigation of UAP. Defense does maintain robust safety and security reporting and management frameworks that are sufficiently flexible to capture UAP. Not too sure about that. The Australian government is aware of the establishment of the United States All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, and defense monitors AARO reports. That's incredibly questionable as well. There are no plans to replicate a similar mechanism. The government remains committed to aviation safety and national security. Should there be a compelling reason to believe existing reporting mechanisms are insufficient, the government would reconsider. Thank you again for forwarding petition EN5115 for my consideration. Now, just look at the contrast there. Everything that the US has done that we've covered so far, and the blatant dismissal, move along, folks, nothing to see here. We're all good in Australia. We know what's in our airspace. Our existing reporting protocols are A-OK. We're better than the US. We know what's in our airspace. There are no problems reporting with whatsoever. Good on you, mate. We're all sorted. Closest of allies yet, we could not be further apart with respect to taking the issue of UAP seriously. So that kind of brings me to a recent set of documents that I received through the Freedom of Information Act. And I'm going to come to your comments in just a moment. I want to get to this. So I thought, well, I'll take it upon myself to actually request. I want to get to the bottom of, and I should have done this a lot sooner, but I only did it recently. Well, what informed that written response from the Minister for Defense? Now, obviously, it's pretty much carbon copy from a lot of the text you saw that was in that Senate estimates brief, which I've covered many, many times on this podcast. But I requested copies of internal briefing notes, advisory notes, ministerial submissions, including attachments, correspondence, whether it be electronic, written, created or received by the Department of Defense between the 1st of August 2023 and October 2023 regarding ministerial response. And that number, all internal briefing notes. That ministerial response was the document I just read from the Minister for Defense. So I was looking at specifically all internal briefing notes and advisory notes, ministerial submissions, correspondence that helped inform the written response provided for the Minister of Defense, the Honourable Richard Marles, to the Chair of the Standing Committee on Petitions. And I also was focusing on that specific petition, all internal briefing notes and correspondence, whether it be electronic or written, related to that petition. So that secured for release the following document. And I've covered this on X. So if you, I haven't, it's on my website, the unexplainedrundown.com. You can access the documents I'm about to show you. But if I pull up this one here, so it was how many pages? Not massive, 31 pages of documents. Basically, a lot of email correspondence going back and forth across different agencies and departments within defense to try to figure out the best way to respond, provide a written response, draft a written response for the Minister for Defense, Richard Marles, to sign off on, and for that to be provided to the chair of the commission, the committee, the petitions committee, I should say. So, you know, a lot of back and forth, pretty straightforward and boring. But what they had, and this was the referral letter that was sent from the petitions committee to the Minister of Defence's office, from Susan Templeton, who's the chair of the Standing Committee on Petitions. So we've got evidence that that letter was forwarded, and then a lot of back and forth between the Royal Australian Air Force Ministerial Liaison Office and other, you know, agencies, Defence Space Command. How are we going to best draft a response to this this petition? Now, what is interesting in this set of documents is that not only does it include the back and forth emails is really not anything all that overly interesting, but what I want to bring you to, if I come to it now, there we go. So not only do we have that written response, that was the draft, Actually, sorry, this is the signed version. I don't know why the signed version was never provided to the petitions committee. But what also was prepared for the Minister for Defense were ministerial talking points, so that in the event that this topic got traction within the news media, which sadly it didn't, that if the Minister for Defense was asked a question, whether it be on Sunrise, because they always have the Minister for Defense on, they never ask him a question about UAP, or if it was the Today Show, or if it was the ABC, or if it was at the National Press Club, in any setting where the media has an opportunity to ask the Minister for Defense questions, here are some scripted talking points that the Minister of Defense, Richard Marles, can use to address questions about the establishment of an investigatory body into UAP. And it's a carbon copy paste from what is in the response letter that you just saw and the Senate estimate brief, talking points and other information. If asked the question about, well, will Australia establish an investigatory body into UAP? Here's your response, Richard Marles. Defense stopped handling UAP-related reporting in 1996 after it was determined there was no scientific or other compelling reason to resource the recording or investigation of UAP reports. Defense assesses. I don't know if you have assessed anything since 1996, but you're saying you have. Well, show us the evidence. Defense assesses its reporting investigation mechanisms, while not specific to UAP, are adequate to address all safety and security incidents. Really, you want us to believe that if the US can't get it right and they have to implement mandatory reporting mechanisms specifically pertaining to UAP, you think if the US, the biggest and mightiest military power on the planet, can't get it right that Australia has? I don't think I buy that argument. This remains Defense's position and aligns with our priorities, mission, and objectives. Defense is aware of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office within the United States Department of Defense. However, this is a matter for the United States government and has no influence on the Australian government position on UAP. Move along, folks. UAP is not an Australian problem. It's an issue that's isolated to the United States. If asked about existing reporting mechanisms, here's your response. Defense does not have a specific policy governing the reporting and recording of UAP by members of defense or members of the public or defense personnel. Any aviation safety incident involving defense that may potentially be characterized as UAP would be handled by the Defense Aviation Safety Authority, which I've covered repeatedly on this podcast. And we know that the occurrence reporting mechanism that is under the remit of the Defense Aviation Safety Authority is nowhere near sufficient to capture observations of UAP. Only if it's maybe a near miss. And so if you're a pilot or a member of the Royal Australian Navy or the Army and you see a UAP, but it doesn't present any immediate threat, there's no risk of a near miss, or there's no immediate threat to aircraft, whatever it might be, you don't have to report it. If you observe it, but it doesn't present any safety issue, forget about it. It's all good. Civilian aviation safety incidents are investigated by the Civil Aviation Safety Authority, CASA, which also does not have any current reporting or recording mechanisms pertaining to UAP, nor does Air Services Australia, which looks after all of our air traffic control in the country. If the Australian public wishes to report UAP, they should contact their local police authorities or get in touch with a civil UAP research organization, a la MUFON, Enigma Labs, some of the other ones that are in there. You have the Nanu app that Hollywood and her team have worked hard to get up and running. So there are quite a few publicly available reporting mechanisms that are out there. But what happens if you go to the cops? If you've seen a UAP hovering over where you are and you think, geez, that's a bit alarming, maybe I should report that to the cops. What are the cops going to do? Have they got any procedures or protocols in place to handle UAP reports? And if they do, what do they do with it? Do they have an investigatory body in place? You can bet your bottom dollar that they don't. So those are the very unsatisfying talking points that the Minister of Defense would have gone off on, would have stuck to, stuck to the talking points if he was ever asked the question by the media about, well, why isn't Australia taking this topic of UAP seriously? And unfortunately, no one in the news media has ever gotten off their ass and asked that question. Kudos to some journalists in print media, Jamison Murphy, who's done a great job for the Canberra Times, Frank Chung for news.com.au, the Times and even the ABC for Australian Story. Kudos to them for at least asking questions of defense media, but they don't even get a response. So when when the Australian Department of Defense is asked a question by the news media, defense media doesn't even respond, or they decline to comment. So it's long overdue that the Australian news media get off its ass and ask the Australian Minister of Defence, Richard Marles, some pointed questions about why Australia is not taking the issue of UAP seriously. And you know what? News media, Sunrise, Today Show, all those other shitty breakfast shows, well, you can now refer to this and try and come up with some questions that go above and beyond these basic talking points. So my frustration with the lack of the these breakfast shows that always have Albo and Richard Marles on, they never ever ask any questions of Australian leadership about its lack of engagement on the UAP topic, which is incredibly frustrating. So that paints a picture for you as to where we're at with with the Australian Department of Defence, a very lackluster state of affairs at the moment, unfortunately. Now, why is this all important? Because of everything that's happening and where we're at now, which is President Trump's commitment, irrespective of what you think of Trump, his commitment to being transparent, at least in the eyes of the public, and releasing US government files on UAP, UFOs, and extraterrestrials. Suffice it to say, the initial tranche that was released of files was underwhelming, didn't really have a lot in there, but if you listen to what Burchett, Luna, and Burleson are saying, they're saying there's a lot more interesting information that is potentially waiting to be released. So let's use that as an opportunity to maybe have a look at some of your comments and questions that come through, because I feel like I've been ranting and raving for a bit for a while here. So let's come back to some of your comments. Let's say I'm going to go back towards the I got Mr. Bill Chalker in the house. Always good to see you, my friend. Thanks for tuning in. You're becoming quite the regular, so always good to see you in the room. Let's have a look. Anthony, Counts Down Under. Has there been any evidence that the Five Eyes met within the time frame for the report to be shared? The only documentary evidence that I've been able to locate to date is that Australia, New Zealand, the UK, Canada, and the US engaged at the Pentagon on the 24th of May, 2023 for an all-day caucus or forum on UAP with each Five Eyes member country invited to present. So Australia was first cab off the rank. I was able to secure for at least the agenda for that Five Eyes inaugural UAP caucus working group meeting, and Australia was first cab off the rank. So what would the Australian Defence representative, who was a representative, I believe, of the Defence Intelligence Organisation, what would they have to present on UAP if Australia hasn't touched this topic for 30 years and its current position is move along, folks, nothing to see here. We don't see any scientific or compelling reason to devote resources to the investigation of UAP. That's what it's saying publicly. Now, behind closed doors, that might be a very different scenario, though. But again, I'm only speculating on that front. And Mark, I totally agree. Australia will always take the back seat of the bus on this subject to the US, which is unfortunately what we're seeing. And I'm sure Bill will say the same thing about Australia's kind of lackluster efforts historically. Maybe the Royal Australian Air Force was a bit lackluster in how it handled reports. Appreciate your comments there, Jimmy. FOIA work is fantastic. Got some good replies back. The AARO one was a good one. That was a significant one because it opened up the door for folks in other countries, whether it be Chris Sharp, whether it be Daniel Otis in the UK, whether it be some colleagues across the pond, Colin and Nick in New Zealand, to submit comparable FOIA requests in their countries to see what their defense Department of Defenses were doing with respect to that Five Eyes forum on UAP that was led by AARO. And yes, someone did represent Australia at that meeting. I'm hoping to report on that a bit further down the road if I can get more information. Bex's comment, ATIP was an official program. It was Harry Reid that secured the congressional funding to get ATIP off the ground. Lou Elizondo, it seems, assumed was director as he may have been working alone, the only person working in the ATIP program. Well, it wasn't just Lou. There was actually, if you've listened to what he said historically, there were quite a few people that were personnel ATIP. ATIP is a big, still unresolved area for me. I know there are others that have same questions, like, certainly John Greenwald is trying to get a lot of documentation pertaining to ATIP and providing greater clarity. And, it's just very muddy, unfortunately. And that's why I think it's important that we see what Jay Stratton has to say when his baby book comes out, because he's publicly stated that he set up ATIP in 2015, which is in stark contrast to some of the public statements that Lou has made historically on podcasts and interviews. Beck, but the US has their own programs, not to mention full access to data, yet play dumb and call it a UAP. Jimmy, in response to Bex, I don't believe that Elizondo might be involved in other programs. If you haven't listened to Ross' latest piece talking about Elizondo, that's a good point. Ross was asked a question on his weekly Q&A on Reality Check, and he says that, basically said that there will come a time when Lou Elizondo has to provide a full accounting for his role in ATIP. And, a lot of people say, oh, this detail and the minutia doesn't matter. I think it does. If you want to have a full accounting for everything that's happened on this topic from the US government's perspective of trying to get to the bottom of it, I think it's important. I think the details matter, certainly matter for me. And as Jimmy says, let's see what Jay Stratton says in his book when it comes out. Let's have a look. Jimmy says, AARO should probably just hire Mick West. They probably already do. I would not be surprised. It's been long rumored that Mick West is done some consulting work with Enigma Labs, which is funded by none other than Peter Thiel. And I know Bex has some interesting thoughts on Peter Thiel and his prodigal son, Jesse Michaels. But I might leave that conversation for another day. Shorter Cook says, never say never. I still have hope. Australia only needs significant mention in some of these releases to start the ball rolling, perhaps. Yep, I agree. If, I mean, it would be, I'm interested to see what additional engagement AARO has had with its allies, namely the Five Eyes. Because if you remember back to one of the media round tables from a couple of years ago, I think it might have been last year, that Dr. John Kosloski said one of his primary focus areas for AARO in 2025 was international engagement. And I haven't seen any evidence of any international engagement in 2025, but it could be because I haven't got those documents back through FOIA, because I've still got quite a few that are pending. Yes, Aaron, Australia needs its own AARO, or at least as a starting point, a formal reporting mechanism in place, so that if a F-35 pilot does see something unusual or anomalous in Australian airspace, that they feel comfortable and confident that they can report it without fear of ridicule and stigma. Because we've heard from Ross Coulthart, he said he's had F-35 pilots sit down with him in his living room and say, we're seeing things in Australian airspace we can't identify. They're looking pretty anomalous. Ross says, would you be prepared to report it? And the response that Ross gave, and this is at a Sydney Q&A event that he did, remind me, Bill, it was in October 2023, I believe, or was it 2024? I can't remember, where he said that, F-35 pilots that have spoken to him about observations they've had of anomalous objects in Australian airspace would not report it because they're getting a clear message from the Australian Chief of Air Force that it's not being taken seriously by the higher ups. And if they do report it, what happens to it? Does it get investigated? Does it go anywhere? You know, and Beck says we would want independent body oversight of AARO because we don't let our government get away with the corruption the US partakes in. Yeah, I know a lot of folks have some serious questions and doubts about AARO, but I think that's not a bad idea to have an independent body implemented that would investigate it down under. Benno, great to see you, my friend. AARO aren't there to give up UAP transparency to the public. They're beholden to Department of War and ODNI. Certainly that if ever you've had any correspondence or communication with the public affairs officer, Susan Goff, which I have, she will only respond to you when she wants to, and if it's in the interest of the Department of War and their strategic narrative. So I've caught her out a number of times where I've emailed her repeatedly asking for confirmation or clarification, and it has never come. So I do believe that there is a very deliberate strategic narrative that is being pushed by the Pentagon, particularly Susan Goff. I mean, for example, every single FOIA document that gets released pertaining to UAP, it's flagged with Susan Goff before it is formally released. So everything goes through Susan Goff that reaches the public, which, you know, people should be concerned about. And, you know, people say, oh, she's just doing a job. She's doing a job, but it's, you know, it's very much a strategic narrative. She's only, the US Department of Defense is only revealing what it wants to reveal. And some will say, well, you know, tell your friends, tell your enemies. But, you know, I think you can certainly reveal information that is of interest and value to the general public that does not send adversaries going down a spy path. Aaron, I would also suggest sending emails to the Shadow Minister of Defense, Senator James Patterson, too, due to strong possibility of a change in government. Yep, I always think there's an opportunity to reach out to members of Parliament and senators. Thank you, as always, Jimmy, just trying, I know, and kudos to you, too, my friend, for submitting FOIA requests. Anyone can submit a FOIA request. If you know, any government document that's produced, any documents produced by the Australian government, Australian Department of Defense, you're entitled to that information. You have a right to exercise your right to information. So you can submit a FOIA request, and now you may not get a response because the document has been located or there's no document, or you might get a response, but it's pretty lackluster because there's a whole lot of redactions over it to protect national security, foreign government relations. That's to be expected. But if you have an interest in seeing what the government is, you know, talking about behind the scenes to a degree, you can you have a right to that information. So if you want to go after it, you certainly can. I just want to see if there's any other Aaron, I also hate with the Australian media is that when they do cover the topic, they always play the X-Files theme. That's true. I was interviewed on was it 4BC Brisbane last month. I thought it was a decent interview. The Gary, I can't remember his last name, but we covered it last month. I think he asked some tongue-in-cheek questions, but the conversation I thought went pretty well. We covered a few bases, but they played the bloody X-Files theme at the start of the interview, which is always a little bit frustrating. You know, get that little air of the giggle factor. Get the giggle factor in there before we talk about it. Bex, I suggested Grant negotiate that's not played for him to appear on mainstream TV news and also argue in the interest because it make them appear aggressive. It's frustrating that they play the X-Files theme. It's starting to happen a little bit less. And, you know, Australia, I think ABC Australian Story was a significant step because the ABC is still regarded as particularly Australian Story, as a reputable program, and for them to cover Westall is significant. And but prior to that, for ABC, their podcast Expanse, to cover the Tully saucer nest case, which happened only a few months before Westall in January 66, and Westall was in April 1966, and also cover Bill and Keith Basterfield's work, historical research on this whole topic, and certainly Bill's work, going through RAAF's files. I think they did a really good job of covering that historical perspective, and they kind of covered some of the documents that I was able to secure for release through FOIA as well. So there are your comments thus far, folks. I haven't gone through every single comment because there's a few other things I want to walk you through, and that leads us to where we are at today. So I still refer to the Department of Defense, but it's now the US Department of War, following President Trump's February announcement that he was directing the Department of War to facilitate a declassification and release of the US government's documents pertaining to UFOs, UAP, and extraterrestrials. We have the war.gov/UFO website, which reportedly has received 1 billion views since it went live. And so this was on the 19th of February, President Trump's directive or announcement, more accurately, based on the tremendous interest shown, I will be directing the Secretary of War and other relevant departments and agencies to begin the process of identifying and releasing government files related to alien extraterrestrial life, unidentified aerial phenomena. I'm not too sure why they used aerial there when it's anomalous is the current congressionally accepted term, and unidentified flying objects, and any and all other information connected to these highly complex but extremely interesting and important matters. God bless America. That was in February. The directive, in response to President Donald Trump's directive for transparency on U.S. government information regarding unidentified anomalous phenomena, the Department of War, with support from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, is overseeing government-wide efforts to expeditiously find, review, identify, declassify, and publicly release unresolved UAP-related records and historical documents in the federal government's possession. This is an unprecedented historic undertaking, which it absolutely is, that requires coordination between dozens of agencies and the review of tens of millions of records, many existing only on paper, spanning many decades. Given the scope of this task, the Department of War will be releasing new materials on a rolling basis as they are discovered and declassified, with tranches posted every few weeks. The materials archived here are unresolved cases, meaning the government is unable to make a definitive determination on the nature of the observed phenomena. This can occur for a variety of reasons, including a lack of sufficient data, and the Department of War welcomes the application of private sector analysis, the McWests of the world, information and expertise. Department of War will continue to conduct separate reporting on unresolved UAP cases as mandated by statute. Under this administration, we will pursue the truth and share our findings with the American people. And so then we had, on May 8th, cleared for release, statement: the Department of War is in lockstep with President Trump to bring unprecedented transparency regarding our government's understanding of unidentified anomalous phenomena. They've now moved to the current term. These files, hidden behind classification, have long fueled justified speculation, and it's time the American people see it for themselves. This release of declassified documents demonstrates the Trump administration's earnest commitment to unprecedented transparency, and that was by U.S. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth. And then you have, 161 files that were released. So you can have a look at war.gov.au and look at all of those files yourself. But to make your life a lot easier, I would recommend, and kudos and credit to my good friend John Greenwald here, on the Black Vault. John has developed an AI search tool where you can search within every single document, or a massive percentage of documents in that tranche, that first release, and look for what you're after. So 158 total records. It was originally 161. It's reduced a little bit. 116 documents, 28 videos, and 14 images. Search tips. Now, I have taken it upon myself to search on this term, Indo-Pac-Com. And if you guys are wondering what Indo-Pac-Com is, let me read to you some information. So the United States Indo-Pacific Command, Indo-Pac-Com, is critically significant to Australia as the core framework for the US-Australia alliance, providing the primary security umbrella for Australia's immediate region and facilitating joint defense against evolving strategic threats. Indo-Pac-Com covers over 50% of the globe, managing regional stability, freedom of navigation, and security partnerships essential to Australian national interests. Key aspects of Indo-Pac-Com's significance to Australia include core security and deterrence, AUKUS, which is the trilateral alliance between Australia, the UK, and the US, AUKUS and military integration, regional partnerships, space and technology cooperation. And digging a bit deeper into that, it goes into US Space Forces. Indo-Pacific works closely with Australia on space domain awareness, satellite protection, and countering emerging threats, which UAP have been regarded as emerging threats, with Australian officers embedded in US commands. And the last one, protecting maritime interests. So in essence, Indo-Pac-Com is the primary mechanism through which the United States and Australia cooperate to maintain a favorable balance of power in the Pacific. So why are you wondering Indo-Pac-Com is important? Well, there were 4 records pertaining to Indo-Pac-Com. Now, one of them was an email correspondence from April of 2025. It's really not all that interesting. So if I show you, I mean, there's nothing overly significant in this email chain. You can see a lot of stuff has been heavily redacted. But if I zoom on in for us, you know, Indo-Pac-Com is basically in the body of the email on a number of occasions. Yeah, it's relating to a US aircraft observed one possible UAP for 12 seconds at that destination, or whatever that code represents, flying at unknown altitude and unknown speed. No interference was noted. Then you have, that was on the 10th of April, 2025. 11th of April, US aircraft observed one possible UAP for 23 seconds, flying at unknown altitude, unknown speed. No interference was noted. So just, you know, basically the, you know, some of the reporting, the documentation on the reporting. But this is what is interesting. If we come back to John Greenwald's UFO search, this is where it gets interesting. So you have unresolved UAP report in Indo-Pac-Com for 2024. And this is, I'll play this full screen so you can see it. Only goes for 9 seconds, but this is classified as UAP. Now, what that is, who knows? Is it something prosaic? It could possibly well be. You can see all of the redactions there are obviously sensitive information pertaining to that could identify sources and methods and the sensor systems. So that's been redacted. Now, these redactions show that it is certainly well within AARO's capability to facilitate a timely declassification of video footage, because you can see how quickly these have all been released, with the and AARO's being involved in this effort. So that video's United States Indo-Pacific Command submitted a report of a UAP to the AARO, consisting of 9 seconds of video footage from an infrared sensor aboard a US military platform in 2024. The reporter did not provide any oral or written description of the observation. We have another one. Unresolved UAP report in 2023. Again, United States Indo-Pacific Command submitted a report of UAP to AARO consisting of 1 minute 59 seconds. So let's give this a look. Now, I'm playing these because these are obviously of interest to Australia, because I've just talked about the significance of Indo-PACOM for Australia. Now, again, what is it we're looking at? Your guess is as good as mine. It's pretty hard to tell, but it was classified as UAP. Now, you would think that after AARO has implemented a reporting protocol for UAP, that they would have kind of a checklist of questions that trained observers would be, covering off on in their report to, reporting this information up the chain to AARO. So you would hope that a trained observer like a pilot is not just seeing something and think, oh, I can't identify that, it must be a UAP. There would be a criteria, not so much a criteria, but there would be a checklist that they would have to go through when completing their report and providing any supporting sensor data or metadata to assist AARO with its investigation. Again, what is it? I have no idea. It's certainly something that's being captured on the infrared, but your guess is as good as mine as to what it is. But again, it's all. Where's my mouse gone? Oh, I've lost it. There we go. And we're kind of at the end there. But it's UAP. It's being classified as UAP. It's been submitted to AARO, or it's been reviewed by AARO, and it's being captured in Indo-PACOM, which is of strategic interest to Australia. So that was in 2023. We have another one in 2024. Classification not specified, location was not specified either. But let's have a play of this one. This one is 39 seconds, so relatively brief. Now, what's really challenging when you're watching these videos, as Mick West rightly points out, what impact is parallax having on what we're looking at? Is what we think that object is that moving, or is the sensor camera actually moving? Again, really hard to kind of discern or take anything away from this footage for me as an untrained observer. Now, this one is, I think, one of the more interesting videos that people have highlighted, because you can see it's moving in front of these wind turbines. There's a wind farm, wherever you presuming it's a wind farm, and I know Mick West has covered off on this one in terms of trying to provide some analysis. But what's interesting is it kind of is making this straight line kind of track, and then all of a sudden, it appears to, we don't know if it is, it appears to reduce its speed and come to almost a stationary halt and then reverse direction. Now, when I saw this video for the first time, I thought, well, that's exhibiting characteristics that to me look like something that might resemble a drone. How do we know that that is not a drone? There's no, again, I'm not a trained observer, so I have no idea, but it was one of the more interesting videos that people have referenced, and that those are the Indo-PACOM results. Now, it's not just Indo-PACOM that is significant for us in an Australian context, because what happens when we type in Papua New Guinea, which is right across the pond from Australia? We have a State Department cable from 1985. Now let's have a look at the document. And again, I'm showing you this if you haven't seen any of these documents up until now. So, some form of email. Port Moresby, January 1985. Zoom on a bit again. Subject, Papua New Guinea inquiry, overflights. It's a cable. We've got American Embassy, Port Moresby, to USC in INC PAC, Honolulu, immediate into these other Australian Embassy in Canberra. So I would be interested to see what I can FOIA through or get through the National Archives on this one. Subject, Papua New Guinea inquiry overflights. Embassy, January 28, received informal inquiry from PNG National Intelligence Organization, NIO, concerning reported sightings of high-altitude, high-speed aircraft over PNG during evening January 24. Matter came to the National Intelligence Organization's attention when its officer in Wewak reported local residents had been frightened by overflights, which led to the provincial premier's calling of a public meeting on the subject, attended by the Prime Minister, who was weekending in his electoral district. 2. NIO said there have been various reports of unidentified aerial phenomena, a UAP being used in 1985, the night of January 24, including fast-moving objects with lights, contrails, and then page 2, and noise. The report, in which NIO places some credence, originated with an Air New Guinea pilot who had just taken off from Wewak en route to Port Moresby. Pilot said his radar picked up aircraft flying south to north at high altitude and high speed when he was over, what's that? Angaram. And then the coordinates. Several visual sightings of contrails were also reported from various points around PNG of one aircraft moving north to south at 1900 local time, and of 6 to 8 aircraft traveling south to north at 10 o'clock local time. Based on our records and telcon with whatever that is, we have told NIO we knew of no B-52 overflights and no US aircraft in PNG airspace on January 24. Although information provided us on these sightings is very sketchy and sources were unsure of the directions in which the aircraft were flying, we would most appreciate confirmation of paragraph 3 above and any light you might throw on these reports. And then, and that's it. So PNG is only across the water from us, and you think that would be of interest to the Defense Intelligence Organization or the Australian Department of Defense? And again, this cable's been sent to the American Embassy in Canberra, not the Australian Embassy, but the American Embassy in Canberra, which is interesting. So that's also something to factor in. Well, what happens when we come back to the UFO file search tool that John has put together, and we now search for Five Eyes, which again is US, Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand. I'll use the acronym there, FEEY. And what do we have? We have 13 results in which FEEY is listed, and most of them are reports that are releasable to the Five Eyes. So let's just have a look at this one. This is Iraq 2022, Iraq 2022, Syria 2022, Syria 2023, Mediterranean Sea January 2024, Gulf of Oman 2024. Again, it's mainly all saying it's the reports releasable to Five Eyes. Iraq 2024, Location not specified, although Arabian Gulf 2020, Arabian Gulf 2020, Syria 2023. Middle East is interesting. Gulf of Aden, July 2024. Geez, I don't even know how to pronounce that. Mediterranean Sea 2025, Syria 2024. So a lot of reports of UAP that are releasable to the Five Eyes. So, and Australia, the Australian Department of Defense does not want to take this topic seriously, does not want to follow the US's lead and consider implementing reporting protocols. The groundwork's already done for them. AARO has put together comprehensive reporting protocols that are now mandatory. So if you see something, you've got to say something. Well, would it really be that hard for Australia to implement a comparable approach? But apparently they don't see any scientific or other compelling reason to devote resources to the investigation of UAP, even though we can see what's happening across the pond in PNG and in Indo-PACOM. So I thought that was quite interesting, and rightly so. Good friend of the show and wonderful reporter, I should say wonderful researcher, TP Loft 2008. Reminder for the Aussies in the room, Australia is directly integrated in Indo-PACOM with multiple senior Navy officers headquartered in top-tier positions within Camp Smith. Saying we don't know is clearly disingenuous, giving the value of the positions that we hold. So that was some pertinent commentary, I think, from TP Loft. And it's not just the US that is obviously taking this topic seriously. Japan, which is a close ally of the United States, is interested in UAP, particularly that some of these sightings, two of these videos, were spotted near Japan in the Indo-PACOM. So let's have a look at what was recently reported in the Japan Times following the release of these documents. Actually, before I do, let me make sure. Oh, yeah, that's right. So we'll pull this up, and we're gonna get to the end, folks. I had a goal to be under 2 hours, but I don't think I'm going to be able to do it today. All right, Japan Times, May the 11th. Tokyo analyzing Pentagon UFO file trove with sightings near Japan. The government's top spokesperson said Monday that Tokyo is analyzing with great interest a trove of previously classified files on alleged UFO sightings released by the Pentagon on Friday, including 2 videos of unidentified anomalous phenomena spotted near Japan. Regarding incidents related to our national security, including UAPs, we are constantly gathering and analyzing information with great interest while maintaining close coordination with the United States and other countries, Chief Cabinet Secretary Minoru Kahara told a regular news conference. Asked about the possibility of Japan disclosing any similar UAP files it maintains, Kahara said the government would make specific case-by-case decisions after comprehensively considering various factors, including the risk of our intelligence gathering capabilities being exposed. The Pentagon on Friday said U.S. President Donald Trump's order to release the new never-before-seen files was intended to provide maximum transparency to the public, who can ultimately make up their own minds about the information contained in these files. In one nearly 2-minute video from 2023 titled DOW UAP PR-47 and reported by the U.S. military's Indo-Pacific Command, citing the incident location as Japan, an infrared sensor aboard a U.S. military platform tracks 3 distinct areas of contrast, maintaining a fixed position and orientation relative to another. To one another. Another video, this one just 9 seconds, and we've played it. Long and reported by the Indo-Pacific Command in 2024 with East China Sea as the incident location, shows a UAP that resembles a football-shaped body near Japan, according to a screenshot of the footage. A caption accompanying the video of the incident, titled DOW UAP PR-46, describes the object as having 3 radial projections, 1 oriented vertically and 2 oriented downward at a 45-degree angle relative to the major axis of the main mass. Now, what stands out there is it says resembles a football-shaped body, which is an interesting shape. Could have potentially ballooned, who knows. In 2024, a group of some 80 Japanese lawmakers was established to investigate and gather information on UAPs, which they consider a serious security issue. The group has heard from US policymakers involved in UAP measures. In March, the group urged the government to create a specialized department devoted to UAPs directly under the Deputy Chief Cabinet Secretary for Crisis Management at the Cabinet Secretariat. Observers said the batch of more than 160 files released by the Pentagon included new videos of known sightings, but provided no conclusive evidence of alien technology or extraterrestrial life. Further releases will follow, the US Defense Department said, as more materials are declassified. The growing interest in UAPs comes as drones and less advanced surveillance technologies proliferate across the globe. In one instance in 2023, the US military's shoot down of a Chinese surveillance balloon that had flown across a broad swath of the country triggered a diplomatic furor. The incident prompted revelations by Japan's defense minister that it strongly suspected objects initially viewed as UAPs that flew over the country in 2019, 2020, and 2021, including over areas near self-defense force bases, were actually Chinese spy balloons. So that's just to kind of demonstrate that, you know, another ally of Australia, Japan, is taking these UAP reports seriously, and they're doing something about it to potentially implement their own investigatory body. But Australia apparently cannot find any scientific or other compelling reason to devote resources to the reporting and recording of UAP and investigation of UAP. And that's where we come to at the end, folks, where I would like to just, for those of you that haven't seen it, let me just pull up on the screen for you. Here we go. Defense publication. So defense media publication in the United States, DefenseScoop. Brandi, Vincent has done a ton of great reporting on UAP in a US context and covering AARO diligently since its formation. They put out an article, this was on the 15th of May, data alone is not disclosure. UAP research community reacts to Trump's first pursue file drop. So I was privileged and honored to be invited to participate in this article. Brandi had reached out to me because I'd been in contact with her over the years regarding Five Eyes engagement on UAP. And she was kind enough to solicit comment from me for her article. And so let me, I perhaps won't read through the whole article because it's a bit of a long one, but it's linked in the description below. So if you want to read it, you can. So DefenseScoop, Brandi, Vincent, 14th of May. Data alone is not disclosure. UAP research community reacts to Trump's first pursue file drop. Pursue is the acronym for what they're calling, what is it for short? I'll read it to you. It is the Presidential Unsealing and Reporting System for UAP Encounters. They love their acronyms. So let me go through this article because I think Brandi did a really good job on it. Experts said this moves the issue out of the fringe and into mainstream national security discourse, but concerns remain. On May 8th, the Trump administration released pixelated imagery of strange, seemingly out-of-this-world objects and official reports by military pilots and other U.S. personnel about metallic spheres, flying discs, and glowing orbs via its first trove of interagency declassified unidentified anomalous phenomena files. This highly anticipated record, the records drop, follows a dedicated years-long public campaign led by veterans, former defense officials, researchers, and other experts to force the disclosure of government-held UAP data. 6 officials deeply involved in that work told DefenseScoop this week that this first tranche of media published under the Pursue project marks a historic yet incomplete step towards government transparency. For years, the public was told there was little to see, said Christopher Mellon, who we all know about, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence. The scale of what exists is itself a revelation, I should say. That said, Data alone is not disclosure. Releasing new files without context may confuse more than clarify. And I've made that argument. And you'll see that in my comments in a moment. Early ambiguities. Mellon served nearly 20 years in the U.S. intelligence community. He drafted legislation that established the U.S. Special Operations Command in 1986. Since retiring from federal service, Mellon has been working as a private equity investor for biotech and IT startups. He also currently chairs the Disclosure Foundation's board. We view this initial release as a meaningful step towards transparency, not because it resolves the major questions, but because it puts something important on the record. The government has been collecting data, receiving reports, and conducting analysis on UAP for decades, and in many cases withheld that material from public view, he told DefenseScoop. That is no longer deniable. Federal agencies and the military have a decades-old complicated legacy dealing with technologies and craft that personnel have reported performing in ways that seem to transcend modern capabilities. At a high level, the Defense Department's teams set up to investigate unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAP, the modern term for UFOs and transmitted objects, have taken different forms over the years. The All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO's latest version. We won't go into the history of AARO because we pretty much know. Let me say, in February, President Donald Trump announced on social media that he would be directing Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and other relevant departments and agencies to begin the process of identifying and releasing government files related to alien extraterrestrial life, unidentified aerial phenomena, and unidentified flying objects, and any and all other information connected to these highly complex but extremely interesting and important matters. Officially changing the name of the Department of Defense requires an act of Congress, but last year, Trump signed an executive order rebranding DoD as the Department of War, or DOW. The Pursuit program encompasses the official interagency activities tasked with handling this mass declassification and dissemination effort. Batches are dropping on the new centralized war.gov /UFO portal, not the existing AARO.mil website. In response to questions from DefenseScoop Thursday, a source who requested anonymity and to be referred to as a War Department official said, AARO is responsible for coordinating the declassification of identified DOW files. AARO also prepares DOW files and files provided by other agencies for posting on war.gov /UFO. AARO will continue to conduct its statutory mission of detecting, identifying, and analyzing and resolving UAP. Any encounters described in these releases that are resolved in future will be posted on AARO.mil. The initial Pursue tranche contained a little more than 160 files, with at least 100 of those, including redactions, according to researchers and experts who are currently studying them. Several officials noted that there's a lot of work ahead to match these records with files that were previously published to uncover trends and other insights. Although there is a lot of information here, there is little context, Alejandro Rojas said. He's a researcher. Works with Enigma Labs. Case summaries without coordinates, sensor parameters, or altitude data make independent analysis very difficult. Rojas is a consultant with Enigma Labs, which runs a public reporting analysis platform that has collected heaps of civilian UAP reports, including sightings occurring near military training ranges, airports, and major population centers. His team is now adding elements from the Pursuit drop to maps in Enigma's free app and website. What makes this valuable for us is that we can cross-reference these official cases against our database of over 200,000 public sightings to see whether patterns emerge, such as clusters in location or time of year. That kind of analysis isn't possible when files sit in a classified vault, Rojas noted. In separate conversations, former senior defense officials also said a lot of the new records were low quality and lacking features that make it difficult to effectively conduct independent analysis. My initial reactions were positive and pleasantly surprised. I thought some of the videos contained truly anomalous phenomena, said retired Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet, a former oceanographer of the Navy, pointing to footage of right-angle turns and formation flying craft. Gallaudet serves as an advisor to the Sol Foundation, the Disclosure Foundation, and Americans for Safe Aerospace. The fact that this was the first time an administration openly admitted that UAP files have been shielded from the public was promising. However, the ambiguity of the video content is concerning, as no metadata was included, he said. Therefore, it is impossible to conclude that any of the objects were truly anomalous. Gallaudet has testified before Congress on UAP transparency topics. He publicly maintains that he is aware of classified Pentagon and IC videos, as well as sonar, radar, FLIR, and other data of UAP that are clearly objects of non-human origin due to their structures and performance characteristics. And if any of those are released, we will know whether or not true transparency is the objective, Gallaudet said. Evidence without analysis. Most of the officials who spoke to DefenseScoop are still sifting through and reviewing all the material in this first pursued drop, so they couldn't precisely confirm how much of the files presented new information that was not disclosed in prior releases by the National Archives, DoD, NASA, or other federal agencies. Many hinted that the majority of the files included media that's already been widely disseminated. For those of us in the UAP research community, the newness of data in the first tranche is underwhelming, said Grant Levac. Most of it is a compilation of documents that have been in the public domain for decades, and that is true. Levac is UAP researcher from Australia who has actively filed information and records requests with multiple governments for years. In his view, the story here isn't necessarily the content, but the process of official acknowledgement. The first Pursue release, he noted, drags the UAP issue out of the fringe and into the mainstream of national security discourse. America's whole-of-government approach, Levac said, stands in stark contrast with Australia at this time. He warned that the transparency gap between the two nations on UAP disclosure is becoming untenable. Levac noted that while the Trump administration continues to elevate this topic as a serious matter, the Australian Department of Defense has steadily argued against diverting resources to this issue. As an Australian researcher, the unresolved reports from the Indo-Pacific and Papua New Guinea are the clear standouts, he told DefenseScoop, regarding the first Pursue trove. These records indicate observations of UAP close to Australian shores, highlighting just how much of a global issue this is. Although many experts expressed frustration with the quality of the Pursue files and their limited context, they also pointed to items that warrant closer attention buried in the initial records dump. The video of the object in Greece making multiple 90-degree turns at approximately 80 miles per hour is notable, not because it proves anything, but because it represents exactly the kind of flight characteristics that has driven sustained military and intelligence interest in this phenomena, the Disclosure Foundation's executive director, Jordan Flowers, said. He and others also spotted imagery and reports captured by NASA's astronauts from Apollo 12 and Apollo 17 missions. They said those records place UAP adjacent observations in a context of the highest credibility witnesses operating the most sophisticated systems of their era. The FBI Orb reports from 2023, including the Eye of Sauron description witnessed by multiple teams from varying locations over 2 days, are striking precisely because they are recent, multi-witness and documented by federal agents, not the profile of easily dismissed anecdotal reports, Flowers noted. One issue that requires more attention as Pursue comes to fruition, he told DefenseScoop, is the US government's reported disinformation campaigns dating back to the 1950s, in which false UAP documents were allegedly produced as a smokescreen for real weapons programs that were being unlawfully hidden from America's view. Sounds very Doty-esque. If some of what is now being released to the public as authentic government UAP records are in fact disinformation artifacts from the era, the public deserves to know, Flowers said. Transparency requires not just releasing files, but accounting for their provenance and integrity. His team will be digging deeper into this and other public accountability matters in June at the Foundation's Disclosure Forum with legislators, national security officials, scientists, legal experts, and journalists. Mellon, the Disclosure Foundation's chairman, added that the organization takes this release at face value as a genuine transparency effort, while remaining clear-eyed that genuine efforts can still fall short. The intelligence community has almost certainly completed sophisticated work integrating this data, distinguishing sensor anomalies from genuine unknowns, and assessing capabilities of observed phenomena, the former senior defense official said. However, none of that analytical product has been released. The more substantive concern is not that the government is trying to overwhelm the public with low-quality data, it's that it is releasing evidence without releasing analysis, Mellon told DefenseScoop. He and other experts wanted to see future Pursue file drops move towards less ambiguous data, better context, and clearer explanations of what the government knows, what it does not know, and what analytical work has already been done. Otherwise, the public is left trying to interpret fragments without the information needed to separate mundane explanations from genuinely genuinely unresolved cases, former Navy aviator Ryan Graves said. The goal should be a durable, credible reporting and analysis process, not just periodic releases of low-context files. Based on his own experiences with military-connected UAP, Graves formed and now runs the witness program Americans for Safe Aerospace to provide an entity for the public to safely and securely report observations or encounters. Through Pursue, his team is seeking records that help improve aviation safety, such as sensor data, pilot and aircrew reports, analyses of operational hazards, and any process changes that make it easier for commercial and military aviators to report encounters without stigma. Something like Americans for Safe Aerospace, I think, is needed in Australia without a doubt, considering we don't have any reporting protocols in place. The most useful releases are not simply the clips that appear unusual. The real value is in records that include clear provenance, sensor data, metadata, chain of custody, date, location, and enough operational context to allow serious independent analysis, Graves said. Ambiguous imagery without that surrounding data is hard for pilots, researchers, or the public to evaluate responsibly. Responding to DefenseScoop's questions, the War Department officials suggested the government plans to release additional files through Pursue on a rolling basis. We're not providing any comment or assessment on the files overall or any specific files so that the American people can make up their own minds regarding the files, the official said. So Brandi, Vincent, kudos to her. She does a wonderful job reporting on UAP in a US context at the defense level. So again, I was honored to be invited to participate or comment in her reporting and hit home that this is not an issue that's been taken seriously in Australia, and it should be. So that was they were the comments that I was able to add to her reporting. So why, as I kind of wrap things up for you folks, we come back to Australia's lack of engagement on this topic. Now, I reached out to defense media. Let's see if I can show you this. This was an email that I sent to defense media. Oops, wrong one. Let me go back to the right one here. Which one am I going to? Sorry, next one. Where is it? There it is. This was on the night. So this was just before the release of that article from Brandi Vincent. I'll just read this for you because this was following the UFO, the first tranche that was released. So I reached out, media inquiry, defense's transparency regarding UAP following US declassification release. Dear defense media team, I'm writing to solicit a formal, there we go. Formal comment from the Department of Defense regarding Australia's current policy on the declassification and public release of historical records related to unidentified anomalous phenomena, formerly known as unidentified flying objects. This inquiry follows the historic release of UAP UFO files by the Trump administration on the 8th of May under the presidential unsealing and reporting system for UAP encounters, Pursue. As noted by the US Department of War and NASA, this initiative aims to provide unprecedented transparency by declassifying decades of original source documents and sensor data for public and scientific scrutiny. Given Australia's central role in the Five Eyes Intelligence Sharing Alliance and our deepening technological integration under AUKUS, the discrepancy between US transparency and Australian non-disclosure is increasingly conspicuous. I would appreciate the department's response to the following. Policy alignment and Five Eyes synchronization. In light of the US Pursue initiative, is the Australian Department of Defense reviewing its own classification protocols to ensure we remain aligned with our Five Eyes partners regarding the public release of UAP-related intelligence? AUKUS and aerospace integrity. Under the AUKUS framework's focus on advanced capabilities, including undersea and electronic warfare, how does the department reconcile the strategy of denial with continued classification of anomalous data captured within our sovereign airspace? Complete list of records. Can the department confirm whether all historical UAP UFO records held by defense and relevant intelligence agencies, including those generated through joint operations with US assets on Australian soil, have been transferred to the National Archives of Australia? That is a key one, because there's an open access period with the National Archives. After 20 years, you can then request for records from the Royal Australian Air Force or the Defense Intelligence Organization, or ASIO, or the ASIS, or the Australian Signals Directorate, through the National Archives after a 20-year window. So if I wanted to look for records that are held by the Defense Intelligence Organization regarding UAP prior to 2005, I can do that through the National Archives. That doesn't mean, though, that there are records that are still maybe classified within the holdings of the DIO, the Australian Department of Defence, that are subject to FOIA. So that's why, the question is, well, are those records, are they appropriately and promptly transferred to the National Archives of Australia? Outstanding classifications. If UAP-related records remain withheld, does the justification for national security remain valid if the same or similar data has been deemed releasable by the United States? Sovereign data decentralization. Is there an active whole-of-government effort to centralize and declassify UAP data for the benefit of the Australian scientific community, mirroring the current US shift towards open-source scientific scrutiny? With the 2026 National Defence Strategy emphasising technological competition domain awareness, clarity on how Australia manages anomalous data is a matter of significant public and parliamentary interest. I look forward to your response. Do you think I got a response? None of Buckley's, because they don't think I am in the same vein of being in media, even though I consider myself a citizen journalist. I don't have any journalistic credentials. I don't represent a media outlet, but I'm still trying to report on information to the general public. I didn't submit correspondence to the Minister for Defence because I had submitted correspondence to him regarding Westall not too long ago. But I thought, well, I'm going to go above and beyond the Minister of Defence. So I submitted to the Prime Minister a letter. This is just a copy of the letter. It was submitted. You can only submit via the website. There's no email address you can send it to. And it was comparable. Dear Prime Minister, I'm writing to you to formally request a review of Australia's policy regarding the declassification and public release of historic reports related to UFOs, UAP, formerly known as UFOs. This request follows historic release of UFO files via the United States administration on the 8th of May under Pursuit, as the United States moves towards unprecedented transparency. So kind of similar vein. Australia now faces a significant policy gap that impacts our standing within the Five Eyes community and the AUKUS partnership. As the leader of the National Security Committee, your intervention is required to address the following strategic concerns. Alliance synchronization. The US Pursuit Initiative has established a new international standard for transparency. If our closest security partner has determined that declassifying this data is in the public interest and does not compromise collective security, Australia's continued stance of non-disclosure risks appearing out of step with our primary ally. AUKUS and technological competition. The 2026 National Defence Strategy emphasises the strategy of denial and the need for advanced domain awareness. And I kind of touched on this in the email to defence media. For Australia to remain competitive in the aerospace electronic warfare sectors, our scientific community must have access to the same anomalous data and sensor signatures currently being released to the American scientific community. And sovereign accountability. There is an urgent need for a centralized whole-of-government effort mirroring the US system to ensure that all UAP-related data held by the Department of Defence and intelligence agencies is identified and, where appropriate, moved into the public domain via the National Archives of Australia. Is that currently taking place? I'm not 100% sure. The Australian public deserves the same level of transparency regarding sovereign airspace anomalies as that currently being afforded to the citizens of the United States. I respectfully urge you to provide leadership on this issue by establishing a formal mechanism to align our disclosure protocols with the US Pursuit system, ensuring Australia remains a transparent and proactive partner in the changing landscape of global aerospace security. Haven't yet received a response from that. Probably won't get one, but at least it's on the record. So if that was if someone FOIA'd, for the PM around UAP records, that would be included. It should be included anyway if there's be acknowledgement of receipt of it. So that's pretty much where we're at, folks. Hopefully I've highlighted for you in this evening's episode just how seriously, since 2004, that sparked off the modern era of UAP, the Nimitz incident, through to ORSAP in 2008, ATIP, then the UAP task force, ODNI's preliminary assessment, the establishment of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office with its inaugural director, Kirkpatrick, and now Dr. John Kosloski, 6 congressional hearings in 4 years, mandatory UAP reporting for all of the services, and now you've got the President Trump's commitment to transparency, at least at face value at this point, where it remains to be seen if it will be just an attempt to flood the space with information, or if there's actually going to be some meaningful, previously unseen documentation that's going to be released. So all of that, what the US is doing, and what is Australia doing? None of Buckley's. It's not doing a single thing. Its long-held position of move along, folks, nothing to see here since 1996 remains exactly the same. Sure, they've made some talking points and some comments about, oh no, this is what everything we've got in place at the moment is sufficient. I don't think that's the case. And an example of that, if F-35 pilots are speaking to an investigative journalist, Ross Coulthart, about concerns they have of anomalous objects in Australian airspace, but they're not reporting it, I think we have a problem. So that's why I think UAP reporting protocols are at least a good first point of call, or at least for the Australian Department of Defence to commit to a formal review of its 30-year position on UAP, that there's nothing to it. So hopefully this has been of interest, folks. Again, a lot of comments have come through, so let me just go back and show some of these. That's a good point, Anthony. We need to figure out how to get onto Karl Stefanovic. He's usually pretty good at hitting some hard questions. See if he will ask, but I can't find any way to get in touch with him. I think he's got his own, correct me if I'm wrong, he may have his own podcast. I'm not sure. I was invited to be, I was interviewed on the Today Show last year, actually, specifically talking about Westall. He wasn't on that day. It was David Campbell and Sarah, what's his last name? Can't remember her last name. Sarah. Anyway, they were asking. I was talking specifically about Westall, but it'd be interesting to see if Karl is. I mean, Karl asked some pretty good questions when you've got Albo or Richard Marles in the hot seat as the interviewee subject. They often ask some. Sarah Arbo, that's what I'm thinking of. They ask some pretty good questions, and an example of that is Sarah Arbo only recently, really giving it to Albo about Labor's backflip on capital gains tax, on negative gearing, basically. Really sticking it to him. So, geez, I'd love to see some questioning along that with respect to UAP, considering the US is taking it so seriously. Okay, so some folks have had to run. Jimmy says Ryan Graves stated that his organization has data from Australia. Yeah, I'd reached out to Ryan Graves, and he said he's got a couple of reports from Australian pilots. Didn't go into a whole lot of detail, but there were plans to release those reports in due course. Let's see. That's pertaining to a different comment. So let me see if we've got any other comments. I think that's pretty much it, folks. Mark Shed Talk, Grant, with increased media coverage in the USA with the likes of Fox Network, will we see more coverage here in Australia? Well, there's certainly been more coverage in the last couple of years than there has in years past. And I think that's largely because of everything that happened following David Grush's testimony in July 2023. But unfortunately, the news media in Australia is pretty much copy and paste effort. They'll just spit out what has been reported on the US. The exceptions are, I think, the ABC. The ABC, which has a long history of not engaging on the UAP topic and not covering the UAP topic, has started to do that. And they've done it in, I think, a very serious and respectful way, starting with the Expanse podcast they did a while back, and now Australian Story. And speaking with the producer, Rebecca, they had so much content from the interview subjects for Australian Story, they could have made a second episode, and they just had to cram so much into just 30 minutes. So will there be an opportunity for a follow-up? I don't know, but I'll certainly stay in touch with the producer, and any breadcrumbs that I can find through National Archives or FOIA with respect to West will certainly keep the media apprised. Bex, you would think AARO would be using Palantir software if those directives were legit. There's no better tool to accomplish those goals than using Palantir, especially given the siloed in Pentagon. Palantir's actually just got a big contract, I think, in Australia. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but Palantir is, a lot of people are a bit suspicious of Palantir, that's for sure. Shorter to Cook. Speaking of overseas, I noticed that we had a huge Norwegian file of old UFO anomaly photographs from way back. I wonder if the Norway UFO database had these. Maybe that was some context that I missed regarding that comment. Shorter to Cook one, I'm not too sure. Woo Riders DG, thank you for tuning in. Appreciate you jumping on, even though we're getting close to the end of the show. Thank you, as always, Shorter to Cook. Really appreciate your comments and tuning in. Always good to see Amy, my friend. Good Morning UFO. If you haven't checked out her show, I think she recently reached another milestone in terms of her YouTube subscriber numbers. So kudos to you, Amy, for your commitment to doing shows. I think every day, every morning. You're certainly a trooper and far better committed than I am. I can only manage to find the time to do once a month. So kudos to you, my friend. Ryan Graves stated when he was in Reddit Q&A about his organization that they have data from Australia. That's right. And it would be interesting to see what that data is, but I don't know if it's going to be publicly released specifically. Grant your own media outlet. It's called the Unexplained Rundown. I see it. Part new media. Yeah, boutique media. Maybe I should try and I don't know, get maybe I have to get an ABN or something to formally make it a bit more formal, so that I am recognized as alternative media, put it that way, so that I can at least solicit a response from defense media. Would they even still respond to me? I don't know. Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks, Shorter to Cook. Certainly trying to do what I can, and I'm only one person, so I know, kudos to Anthony. He's submitted letters and FOIA requests, as has Jimmy and others. So, all of this is embarrassing for Australia, and the divide just gets wider by the week. I agree with you. If this conversation, it goes further than what we're just seeing at the moment in the United States. I mean, you got these two contrasting views. AARO saying we haven't found any verifiable evidence yet to suggest that any of this is extraterrestrial in nature, even though they're not adopting the word non-human intelligence. And then you've got these whistleblowers and witnesses that are making these extraordinary claims and not able to produce any evidence because they're saying it's all classified, that there is this long-standing, clandestine, heavily sensitive, secret, compartmentalized crash retrieval reverse engineering program. They're at opposite ends of the spectrum, and they both can't be true. So one of them is true and one of them is not true. And if it does turn out that there is these crash retrieval reverse engineering programs are true, then I think you're going to get some pretty hard questions asked of Five Eyes countries, Canada, UK, New Zealand, Australia, saying, why is Australia investing $500 billion in submarine tech that is old, outdated, antiquated technology, when the US is sitting on next generation propulsive technology, antigravitics and all this stuff as well. So I mean, I don't know. I just, like all of you, I want answers as to what the hell is going on, because unfortunately the waters are probably more muddier today than they've ever been. We just want to know answers. We want the truth. We want the answers. We want the government to be transparent. And that's still, it's a good first step from President Trump's administration with this Pursue initiative. now it's really time will tell if they actually are starting to really take it seriously and release documents that provide some insights into some of these wild claims that are being made. Thank you, Aussie9353 for tuning in. One thing that is a bit disheartening, and I know it's probably all in jest, and President Trump is probably looking at all this from a jovial perspective, but him putting out a photo of him standing next to a gray alien on Truth Social, the optics of that I don't think are really great. To me, that tells me he's taking the piss and he's not taking this topic seriously, and he's only doing this to appease public interest and maybe divert attention from the Epstein schmozzle and the ongoing conflict in Iran. I don't know. That's you got to ask that question. How committed is Trump to really getting to the bottom of this issue and providing answers to the American public and to the rest of the world? I have no idea. So yes, bring on these next videos that apparently the 46 videos that Anna Paulina Luna requested from the Department of War. According to Eric Burleson, some of them are pretty compelling in there. David Grush has probably gone the other way and said they're not all that interesting if he's referring to the same 46. I'm not too sure. And kudos to Jimmy for kind of highlighting that to me. So I don't know. It will be interesting to see. Apparently 8 of those 46 videos we've already seen. They're in Jeremy Corbell's new film about him, Sleeping Dog, which I thought was an interesting look into Jeremy Corbell's journey, where he came from to where he is today, and his relationship with John Lear. I thought that was interesting. But I'm reserving judgment on President Trump's Pursue initiative. The first tranche was a historic step in the right direction, but it was underwhelming. So let's see what happens with the next tranche. Thanks for tuning in, RAAF. Appreciate it. Bex, don't agree, and it's perfectly fine not to agree. Trump has cluster B personality disorder that need extreme attention. Yeah, I mean, I've been going on a bit of a narcissist rant as of late, calling them out, because if there's one thing I can't stand, it's narcissist engagement farmers and folks that are just in this for clicks and views. It really shits me to tears. You're either interested in the truth, or you're interested in making a buck, making a paycheck, or you're interested in doing both. I'm only interested in getting to the bottom of the truth. Shorter to cook, and we'll probably leave it after this comment. I don't think Trump is writing his own material, but I wish he'd stop employing 12-year-olds to do his graphics. Bex, you're reading into Trump's motivations that are too sophisticated. He posted the image because he's addicted to gaining all the attention he can get. You're not wrong. I think that's certainly part of it as well. Yeah, he can't help himself, put it that way. So I think there's probably a lot of truth there to what you're saying, Bex. Well, look, that's it, folks. We're at just under 2.5 hours. I hope this has been an interesting walkthrough. Again, for folks that are used to tuning in, it probably won't be anything that's overly new for you, but hopefully it serves as a good high-level overview for folks that have not chimed in before and tuned in. It just really highlights the great divide that exists, and unfortunately, I believe will continue to exist between Australia and the United States on this topic until there is some significant movement forward in the US that really forces Australia into a position where it has to actually inaction will no longer be a possible path for Australia. It has to take action on this topic. What that action is, who knows? So time will tell. But we can only hope, and we can keep trying to kick down doors and pressure folks to take it seriously. So thank you, Aaron. Look, thank you all for taking some time out of your evening. It's just before 11 p.m. in Melbourne, so I'm going to say farewell, my friends. Thanks for tuning in. Look forward to seeing you again on a future episode of the Unexplained Rundown, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your week and have a wonderful upcoming weekend. So thanks again, And bye for now, folks.
If you have enjoyed this episode of the Unexplained Rundown, please consider giving it a thumbs up, sharing with your friends, family, colleagues, and social network, as well as subscribing to the channel. And if you'd like to be notified whenever the Unexplained Rundown goes live, premieres, or posts a new video, be sure to ring that cowbell.